Roughly 2 years in, I had hired 2 people. I was convinced I needed to build that empire. I had to scale. I had to build the employee base.
There's no other way.
There's no other way.
Kind of what we're trained for, right?
Yeah.
It's all I heard. In fact, I pejoratively call them the real business bros and had a trademark after them now because I was just surrounded by the real business bros screaming at me that you do not have a real business unless you can sell it. You do not have a real business unless you scale it. You do not have a real business unless you're an entrepreneur who builds businesses, sells them, and builds them again. It's just constant around me. And I'm 26 years old, so you're going, well, I guess that's what it takes. And there was part of it that sounded kind of cool. I mean, especially as a designer, you're picturing this cool studio and glass walls and, like ping pong tables and stuff.
Yo. My name is Jonathan Steers. My co-host is Doug Diakite. Welcome to Find Your Freedom, the best entrepreneurship podcast. Being an entrepreneur is hard. That's why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources you need to find your own freedom. Today, we're joined by Torrey Dawley, the co-founder of Sandpaper Studios, a 16-year solopreneur veteran who has shifted his entire purpose to helping solopreneurs build and scale their businesses the right way. Welcome, Torrey. We're super happy to have you with us today.
Hey, thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Welcome to the pod, Torrey.
Thank you.
Torrey, I want to start out. We met through some mutual friends, some Twitter connections, but I've been enjoying following you closely over the last few months as you educate solopreneurs grow their businesses. And one exciting thing that I keep hearing from you is that there's no better time than now to start your own solopreneur business. And I think that's kind of a general statement, but I was wondering if you could really explicitly say, why is now the best time to get this started?
Well, now is the best time to start anything that matters. So there is that. But you're asking for a very specific reason. And first, I'll jump right in quickly. I'm the only owner. I'm the sole founder of my business, Sandpaper Studio. In 2006 is when I started my company. We'll get into that a little bit. And the thing that has really struck me in the last several years is we have seen such a rapid shift in so many facets of our entire economy and really our entire culture and world that we are kind of hitting this really serendipitous convergence right now of like where business is, what people are looking for, and what technology allows us to do. It's kind of like the solopreneur's moment. There's the ability for us to get 10 times more done as individuals than we used to. There are demands on traditional agencies that they just simply are having a difficult time fulfilling. And we see this in like the vacancies of commercial real estate, for example, where the overheads are insane and we can get so much more done even with distributed teams. Even if you're a W-2 employee for somebody and on their payroll, you can still get 98% of your work done from home. And the whole 2020 through 2022 era kind of ripped the veil off of that. And I think that really that's one of the biggest drivers of what makes this such a right moment for people who are willing to learn how to build their business in what I call the hub model, which again, we'll talk about too, which is distinguished from what a lot of people think of as solopreneurship. And that's a term that I'm actually shifting away from a little bit. We could get into that. I still think it's an accurate term, but after a while I get tired of kind of arguing like, hey, do you have to be solo? Yeah. I mean, these guys act like you have to build your own computer from scratch from raw materials or you're not a solopreneur because you relied on someone else somewhere. And I think that's so silly.
Anyone that's going to argue with you on that, I would just stay away from that person completely. They're going to try and get stuck on those types of things. So that's just not worth your time. So what tools like exactly make this? Are you talking AI? Like as I'm hearing you talk this, are you talking about the new AI tools? Are you talking about the fact that everything is just remote? Or all of those things combined?
All of them. I mean, literally all of them. And then I think, so the technologies are kind of easy for me because, there's a tool for literally every business operation. I mean, all the way down to like helping you find exactly who your ideal targets are, right? And then you have the entire social media side where communication has changed so rapidly. When I started, for example, social media, as we know, did not exist. So if I wanted to meet people and connect and network with them, I had to go to a professional association or to some business meeting or a conference. I had to physically be there. Today, we don't have to do any of that. And it's very easy to go find, I walk people through this all the time live, where I'm like, if you want to land a certain client, let's say it's a big company that everybody knows and they admire them, I walk them through in 3 minutes how to literally go find that person from scratch on LinkedIn. And they're always like, holy crap, that's their marketing director. I'm like, yeah, she's right there. You can go say hi right now, like, and get in front of them. And you just have to learn how to build your business that way. So that's opened up doors that have been massive. And then the third is there's a certain level of sophistication and education that's happening right now among the professional world in particular. And that's the thing that's really the clincher here. Because as we start to see price pressures more affect everybody more and more, the CEOs have already gotten used to quality. And so they're not going to just sit there and take less quality because they slash the marketing director's budget in half, let's say. They're going to demand that she goes out and gets the same quality that he's been used to or she's been used to, the leader has. And so that becomes really difficult for anybody who's trying to spend those budgets because they can't afford those big agencies anymore. So final, ingredient component of this is the most talented people don't want to take jobs anymore. And so they're learning how to go start their own businesses and small solo businesses and work together to provide, in my opinion, better solutions to those same clients that they used to serve when they were under the agency, but for half the cost. That value proposition has never rang more true in an economy than right now, and it's going to continue over the next 5 to 10 years.
That's super huge. So a lot of our audience is sort of sitting there and they're thinking, look, I think I have this skill set. I think I have this knowledge. I'm really pumped. I want to go get my own thing started, but I can't seem to take that first step to get in the game, whether it's imposter syndrome, just making them question themselves, or they literally just can't find out like what the first step to do is. Talking to our audience right off the bat here, what do you tell them? What do you tell your clients to say like, hey, here's the opportunity that I keep talking about over and over again, all this great content, but here's really what I think you need to be doing.
Sure. Yeah. Most of my clients kind of fall in either they're already operating or they're in a 9 to 5 right now in an important role. And they just...
Yeah, that's a lot of our audience also. 9 to 5. And they're like, I don't want to do this anymore.
That's right. And that's so common. And it's just going to become more common, whether they choose it or their boss chooses it. And that's unfortunately going to be a thing. So when I consider that market in particular, they already have the skill. That's the baseline fundamental. And I tell people this all the time. Look, your boss is literally selling your skill set to their customers for 3 times what they pay you, by the way. That right there is evidence that you can serve that client. You are qualified to serve that client. But the trick is to understand that talent isn't enough. That skill set is not enough to run and succeed in business. The reason you work for that that boss is because that boss is taking care of the marketing, the business operations, the networking, all the other, the taxes, like all the stuff that goes into running a business. So you have to pick up those skill sets. That's the thing that I think, again, is so remarkable about where we are right now is it's never been easier to start an LLC, get the right tools, start marketing, and start building. So when it comes to getting started, what I like to do is walk people through a process I call Make Your Boss Fund Your Startup.
This sounds fun. I like this. All right.
I have so many friends in the startup world and that whole like Silicon Valley thing. And then where I live in Indianapolis, we're kind of like the Silicon Valley of the Midwest. There's some really incredible people in my network who have brought so much VC money into the city. And we're kind of unsung about that. I like to...
Definitely unsung.
Oh yeah. It's a remarkable amount of energy around that. And a couple of people I could, celebrate them all day, but that's for a different time. So there's a lot of people in my sphere there. And I kind of realized like, look, if you're funding the leanest business model available, you can do that out of your own funds. You don't need an investor. You don't want an investor. It's a nightmare if you tried to take that on and they would never fund you anyway as an individual. But you can leverage the job you have right now to gain everything that people in the VC world are gaining. And that you can save your reserves, right? Build your capital and build your runway for that so that you could afford to take 3 months, 6 months or whatever. You can build your network off of the back of that company, which opens up doors to professional networks. They'll pay for conferences. You can improve your skill set, which again, they'll often pay for education because you're bringing more value to them. And they'll also give you the opportunity to practice your craft with really high quality clients. What more could you possibly ask for? So a lot of people go to that job and it's a paycheck to them. They go home. They, hopefully don't max out their credit cards, but unfortunately that happens a lot. And they sort of just get in this comfortable cycle where they can make the payments, they can survive, their paycheck to paycheck lifestyle's okay. That's just the worst thing possible. So I help people kind of understand, no, let's reframe the way we think about all of this as you are building your runway now to launch your company. It might take 6 months, it might take a year, but you're going to frame it that way so that you can take those steps long before you make that leap, because you don't want to we'll get into my origin story. I made the leap without a lot of that stuff, but I did have one key thing. So it's really important for me that people learn how to do that correctly now while they have the time.
Man, I love the way you painted the picture with, the service that you're providing to your company, working under your boss. You have that skill set. You're already delivering that value to the company. Now, how do you reposition and take that value into the marketplace and do it for yourself? And it sounds like, you help a lot of people figure out step by step, like how they create that and ultimately break off the shackles. So let's go back to your, like you said, your origin story. It looked like, reviewing your background, that you're almost 2 decades in the game as an entrepreneur, solopreneur. Before you took the big leap, talk to us about, what your situation was. Were you in a typical 9-to-5 job? Were you doing the corporate thing? Were you more of a contractor? What was your life like before you made the big leap?
So I went to design school, Ball State University. Shout out to them and their program out there. It's a great one. And I landed a job at an agency right out of school. I worked there for about 1.5 years, and it was more of a traditional agency. So it was kind of difficult for me to do anything other than learn the craft of design. And that's what I was doing then, is design. And over time, that became a problem for me, the way the agency was working, and it just wasn't going anywhere. And I decided I needed to choose something different and find a change. And I had meanwhile been building my network inside of the professional organization for designers. It's called AIGA. And so I was really involved with building my network around other vendors and other designers and other people kind of in that orbit, and learning the skill of kind of networking. I decided to find a job with somebody who was a little closer to the work. So I wanted something that was smaller and where I could have a little bit bigger of an impact. A friend introduced me to somebody who was literally kind of restarting his business and still working out of his house. So that was about as small as you could get.
Ground floor.
Yeah, literally. Turned out one of the most amazing people I've ever worked with and will ever work with, just an unbelievably brilliant brand strategist and designer. And I learned most of the foundation of all my brand strategy knowledge from him. I also learned how to help run a business because I saw everything firsthand. I had front row seats. So I had to learn that really quickly. And I had that growing up. My dad runs his own very small business building houses. So I always had that. I always knew I would run my own thing. I had that goal from the beginning. But I got to really experience it and help, this guy build his business up. And leading up to how I started my company, I had already had it in mind. I had been networking like crazy, and I had expanded my network, and I had direct access to all of the clients that we served in that company. Long story short, there was a little friction with the staff, with a couple of people who were not part of the company, but kind of created some issues. After a while, I kind of got tired of that and was trying to solve that. And in the midst of that, somebody I had interned for in college hit me up out of the blue. They were starting this really incredible, do you guys remember Dwell magazine back in the day with all the incredible interior design and furniture and all that stuff? Well, they were big in that whole market, and they had tons of exposure in really high quality interior wares, and made a name for themselves. And they said, "Hey, we want you to come work for us." And I just decided, you know what? I'm going to take this chance. It feels right to me. I'm just going to go for it. Within about a month, I realized why I didn't want to work in that environment and didn't go back after them once I had interned for them. They're wonderful people, but they were a married couple who didn't like each other very much, and it was real rough. So I kind of got caught in the middle of that. It was really bad. And I lasted there for about 2 months, guys. And I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm out. And I started my business in a way that I would absolutely never recommend anybody ever do. And that is, I literally borrowed $3,000 from a family member who said, "Okay, I believe if you can try to go for it, you can go for it." And I'm sure they would have been okay if I didn't pay it back.
Wow.
That was 1 month of cushion for me. And I had about another month of my own savings at that time. That was
wow.
it.
Wow.
It's scary, terrifying, not ideal, horrible advice. I would never tell anyone to do it. I try to be careful with my business advice today because it's so contextual. And I say this all the time, that excellent business advice for one person's situation could destroy another person. And we have to be really careful when we give our business advice because the context matters. And in my case, having my back against the wall like that really helped. It actually was a good thing. It lit that fire. And I already had the network. That was the thing I was mentioning that I already had. So I just went out to my network and said, hey, I will take anything. I just need money to flow. Let's rock. So I'm doing like, restaurant menus, and like really bad $500 projects at first because I just needed anything to get momentum going. Filling in for freelancing, taking what I could. And meanwhile, continuing to participate in all of the networks and things that I was part of and really trying to, stay involved. After about 6 months, I think, I get this email from the marketing director who I used to work with when I was at my previous design agency. And she says, hey, I took a new job at this company. You were the one I loved working with. I'm calling you because I'd love to work with you. And I said, okay, so just to be clear, you're not with that other company. You're with a brand new company. And here you go. I had no non-competes or anything. And she said, yeah, no, I want you to come in. And that's just so happened to turn out to be a $500 million company who had just went public and needed my work and design work. So I had a meeting the next week, and guys, I walked out with a $40,000 contract from that meeting and basically launched my company from there.
Wow. How early on was that?
Yeah, I believe it was about 6 months. Yes. Yeah.
So let's zero in, double click here on those first 6 months. So what I found kind of interesting was you said that you started with $3,000. And I think obviously this was, $3,000 was a little more then, but still, 16 years ago, it's not a lot of money to start your own business. So that you looked at that as like 1 month of runway, and you were able to quickly start bringing some cash in the door, like with the small projects. And what's the biggest takeaway you think that people can, like you said, you wouldn't recommend people do it that way, but you were put in a position where after 2 months at the company, you knew it was the wrong fit. And so you had to kind of make that decision or go back to the beginning and start working with another big company, right? So what do you feel is the big takeaway from those last 6 months and kind of the way you went about it?
I would have done a lot more freelance work and saved up that money. Yeah. I would have been hustling and grinding a lot more. I had been a little comfortable up until that point and always felt like, well, I could go take another job. And I just found myself after that experience going, I don't want to go through this again ever. This is not, I would rather bank on myself. And I guess if I crash and burn, I'll just go into debt for a minute until I get another job and I'll pay that off, but I should have taken that same hustle and grind mentality and been building up capital on the side previous to that.
But the nuance that's a piece of that also is, it sounds like you probably didn't have too much responsibility at that time, children, family, mortgage, like all those other things. So that plays a big part in this also, is like, look, this is pretty an optimal time to go try this out. So that's another kind of common theme that we have on the pod here is, before you have a ton of responsibilities, it does make it a lot easier to take those big risk steps. Whereas later in your life, when you have more responsibilities, then kind of the side hustle start out is a little bit better of a balance for people. So I thought that was really important to point out that this was a little earlier on, so it worked out a little better for you.
So yes, at that time I had about as few responsibilities as you can imagine. So it was easier for me to take that risk. And if I looked forward to the last couple of years, as I've shifted away from my traditional client work with Sandpaper Studio and into what is going to be my, future work, which is a lot more coaching, consulting, programs, products, that kind of like one-on-one type of work, to kind of paint a picture differently. Now that I have 3 kids and a wife and all these other things going on, I saved up 3 years of capital before I started feeling like, I think I'm good now.
Yeah. That's like the other end of the spectrum. You're like literally.
It was the opposite problem. Yes, I went overboard the other way.
From $3,000 in 1 month to 3 years. Love that.
Yeah. So that tells you where my mindset was to the degree of like, hey, buddy, come on, you're just procrastinating at this point.
There you go. You learn the lesson and put that into play. So, a big thing that is your focus now is the solopreneurs and helping them kind of do what you did, right? When and why did you decide that was going to be kind of the next phase for you in this journey?
It occurred to me a long time ago. And again, I kind of procrastinated on it. One thing that's difficult, and this is what people find when they're in the 9-to-5 making really good money, we call it the golden handcuffs, right? And they get attached to that. And that sort of happened for me in my own client work. It's very, very difficult to say, hey, I'm going to give up, several $100,000 for, 20-ish hours a week that I work and go out and start this whole new thing, from scratch. And I had stayed pretty much off of social media for a long time. I was in a cave for about 10 years where it was just, no, I'm going to focus on my business, my wife, our lifestyle, my kids, all of that. So it was kind of like starting from scratch again. So I knew I would do it at some point, but it took me a long time to get there. I got serious about it around a year and a half ago. 2 years, I started really starting to write a lot more for myself. And then a year and a half ago, I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And only in the last year and change did I get really focused on, social media side. The biggest driver for me is I'm a really big proponent in professional services of limiting the number of clients that you have. So every client comes with overhead and time and correspondence and planning and billing and preparation work. And before you know it, you're soaking up 30 hours of your week just managing your clients. And you can never actually get the work done. And you may not want to turn around and manage a team of 25 people to get all that work done because you want to stay lean, right? So it was really important to me from the beginning to only focus. I set a limit for myself after my first year in business that I would only ever have 8 clients at any given time. And 3 of those clients could be larger clients, which at the time I considered 100,000 plus. And the rest would have to be some mix of, pet projects, smaller clients, industries I wanted to get into, that kind of thing. And all of my peers were calling me insane, and they were trying to, juggle 60 clients at a time. And they're
like, scale this thing, bro, scale it out.
Yeah. And that's, I could tell that story too. My first 2 years in business, despite taking off with that client, I hit a total rock bottom 2 years in. In fact, I will talk about that because it sets context for what comes later. Roughly 2 years in, I had hired 2 people. I was convinced I needed to build that empire. I had to scale. I had to build the, employee base.
There's no other way.
There's no other way.
Kind of what we're trained for, right?
Yeah.
It's all I heard. In fact, I pejoratively call them the real business bros and had a trademark after them now because I was just surrounded by the real business bros screaming at me that you do not have a real business unless you can sell it. You do not have a real business unless you scale it. You do not have a real business unless you're an entrepreneur who builds businesses, sells them, and builds them again. It's just constant around me. And I'm 26 years old, so you're going, well, I guess that's what it takes. And there was part of it that sounded kind of cool. I mean, especially as a designer, you're picturing this cool studio and glass walls and, like ping pong tables and stuff. So I started hiring and made every mistake I could, hired great people, but no idea how to deal with it all and run it and manage it and switch my, the hat I was wearing. Hit a total rock bottom, maxed out all of the debt that I had. Paid them, never missed a payment to them ever. I went 6 months without paying myself at times. It was bad. I mean, it was rock bottom bad, guys. I mean, pushing $150,000 in debt, no more capital available, and just completely I remember one time walking out to my truck after work in my studio that was downtown Indianapolis. And I literally stopped in the intersection because I felt this wave come over me that was an overwhelming feeling of this ends, like this stops now. And I'm not the kind of person to jump off a water tower. So that for me was, okay, I need to change and fix this now. This has to stop. And from that point forward, I decided, okay, we can't do this. I tried to kind of fix things. Ultimately, I just had to let the 2 guys go. And I still try to give them.
What can I change? Yeah. What needs to change? What can I change? And I think it's important here. I really like I like how you're walking us through kind of the timeline, but I think it's important just to really quickly do a summary. So you had this really good marketing job that you were making. It sounded like, 6 figures plus in a corporate job. And it sounded like you were working, you said something like 20 plus hours.
That was my business. That's how it went when I started my business. Yeah. At my marketing jobs, I was making nowhere near that. I was working a lot more and making a lot. Yes. Yeah.
So to compare that with where you are in this, which I guess that they're kind of reverse, but I think it's really important for people to see this ups and downs of entrepreneurship and to be able to sort of balance and understand that you really have to be able to juggle these things, and also to be able to you wouldn't have been able to get to that comfortable status of working less hours and doing the things without doing this reanalyzation and sort of saying like, how am I going to fix this? So I want to jump in there and just point out that there's these huge ups and huge downs, and I love that you're pointing out this part. And I think it's really, I think it really makes our podcast better when the guests really get into this type of thing, because so many people don't talk about these hard parts and aren't able to really get down to look, it can get really brutal out there sometimes, which is why, balancing that risk and having the timing be a really important factor.
Yeah, it is. You're so right, Jonathan.
This was the epiphany moment, right? You're sitting at the intersection. You figured out what you have to do to survive in this business. And that came with letting a couple people go that were not a fit. And how long did it take you to right the ship from there?
Probably 3 years. I would say. 3 years. Yeah. And that letting those people go, by the way, was in the top 3 most difficult things of my life that I can count. And that includes some, stuff that sucks like everybody has. And that's another signal, I'm not made for that. I just don't want that. And so it became a real challenge for me at that moment, because this is 2009. And I'm thinking, what do I do now? How do I build my business? The word solopreneur did not exist. The idea that you could build the way that I built the business from that point forward was, again, a lot of people telling me I was nuts at the time. And no, you just need to find the right hires. You just need to focus on, the sales or the marketing or whatever. And what I realized was I had been farming out work to my other partners, and they were doing a great job, other designers and programmers and photographers and writers, because we had overflow work. And every time they came back with stellar work, and it was perfect. And it was exactly what I wanted. And I didn't have to deal with them. And, it was like, well, why don't I just keep doing that? Why don't I just build the business off of that? And it turned into, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. And I wrote this whole article. People can find it on my website about how I modeled it after my dad's company, about how, if you're building houses and you want to farm out any one of those stages, you can. And that's very common in the world of contractors. And so I thought, okay, well, I could do that too in design. And I've never looked back, and I will never look back. Even in the new version of my business, there's 0% chance I ever have W-2 employees again.
I love that. One of the other angles that sort of is a common theme of all the great content you put out there is that you like to liberate people from the chains of bad business. Can you kind of expand on what you mean by that specifically, and then sort of how your content really talks to those issues?
Yeah, there's a lot to that. I think a big purpose behind why I push what I push is because of what we said earlier, is all of those real business bros, all those people who are like, you've got to be on the cover of Fortune magazine, bro, or you're not real. All of that nonsense that we hear in the real professional world all the time gets so old, and again, is just so non-contextualized and not thoughtful that it just is completely dismissive. And again, people take this seriously. They hear what you say and they apply it to their business, and they either, win or lose. And it's really, really important that we voice people's options out there, because I think the biggest myth of entrepreneurship is that you build a business to set yourself free. For 99% of business founders, they don't even crave freedom. That wasn't something they cared about when they started their business. That was not their calculus. Maybe they thought in 10 years I can sell and make a lot of money. And the higher they are on the true entrepreneurial scale, the more they'll think that way. But when you go out and observe how most business owners actually operate their businesses, there are very few. I mean, the stats are very clear on this. How many actually sell? How many actually sell for valuations that they wanted? How long that takes? I mean, we are talking about decades of work and sacrifice and toil and 75-hour, weeks, and dealing with people they don't want to, taking clients they don't want to, but they need the capital, and all of the pain and suffering and, lack of freedom that comes with building that out for a chance to maybe get an exit that would, I don't know, equate to 5 to 10 years of life or stop. You know what I mean? And the best entrepreneurs on the planet, first of all, aren't interested in selling their businesses. Look at some. You think of people like Zuckerberg, right? Like Zuck's somebody who, how many billions was he offered? And he's like, no. And part of his calculus is I can go make more billions. But the other calculus that people don't understand is he didn't get there because he wanted to make billions. He got there because he was so obsessed with the difference he wanted to make that led to billions. And there's a big difference between those two things. And most serial entrepreneurs, well, their skill and craft is to build businesses and sell them. That is what they do. Well, most founders don't fit that bill either. And there's just massive misconceptions around that. And so I'm really a lot bigger on how much money can you pull in one given year, whether that's direct high ticket services or building out assets that can generate that capital. And what kind of lifestyle can that afford? And what can you do with the revenue on top of that in order to generate compound interest or other sorts of assets? If you can look at those models, there's so many options right now to live today, live right now. You don't have to wait for 10 years of 80 hours a week suffering to then maybe sell and then start living.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, what are you doing it for? And I think one of the things that we hear time and time again on the show is, from these successful people that come talk to us about their journey, is they sit down and they write out their vision. They have that intentionality, and that a lot of times is like the kind of the turning point moment where they're like, okay, now I know what I want. And some others will just work themselves into the grave, look up one day and go, where'd my life go? So I wanted to kind of parlay that into your hub model. So that's one thing that I think you might have briefly touched on earlier, but can you expand on that a little bit? It seems like that's one of those decisions that you made where everything changed from there once you started implementing that hub model.
Yeah, it really did. And this does kind of dovetail into, Jonathan, your point about, how do I liberate people from the shackles of business? And, teaching people the hub model is an example of this, because, the common thought is, well, if you are the only owner in your, you are the only person in your business, you're the owner and you run the business. Well, now you just have a job. That's what they'll tell you. And for me, it's like, well, I'm the only employee of my business, but I outsource anything that I want to outsource to my ridiculously skilled team of experts who can help me scale and expand to any type of project that I want. I've literally had teams of over 15 people on $400,000 budget projects before. That is more than what most agencies are doing. It's like not a problem for me, and I get it done better, faster, and cheaper, which is really, really freaking hard to do. And that hub model allows me to do that. So the key to the hub model is the way that I describe it is it works pretty much like any other agency structure, except it's not hierarchical. So if you took, and this is easier to do if I jumped on my whiteboard behind me, but if you look at your typical agency structure, you have the bosses, the managers, the mid-level managers, then the laborers, let's just call it that, right? And everything's hierarchical, top down. And you put a big circle around that, and that's the business. In my hub model, I am my business. I have my opportunity through my clients. And then I have a project, let's say it's a $200,000 project, and I need 8 people in my team to come on board. And these are people that I've hand selected, worked with forever, and screened. It takes a lot of effort. You have to network. You have to build these teams to make this work. And then you bring them on through the scope that they spec for whatever services they're providing to you. And you bolt them on to your hub. Like, you're the hub, they're the spokes, and then you build them on. And then that circle just gets drawn around them. You know what I mean? And so now that's your team. But it doesn't work hierarchically like a typical agency structure does. I might technically be the top of that hierarchy, but I'm bringing them in to bring their expertise to the table. And the thing about the hub model is so beautiful is then they bring me onto their same projects.
Right.
So, these same photographers, like, I need a designer, my client needs this. Okay, cool. I'll help you out with that. And you end up with this interconnected network web of really highly skilled professionals with really strong networks who are constantly helping each other and working together. And the big advantages to that, I've already talked about, price obviously is one of those. And then the second is the quality, because you're getting the top performers who don't want to take jobs and don't have to, because they can serve clients directly. And then you sort of get this ability to adapt to, I call it in my own, if you look at the bio on my, Sandpaper Studio website, I talk about how we conform to the challenges that the client has, not the other way around. If I hire people under my wing and keep them for 6 years, they're on the same account, the same type of work, the same style, the same content, the same language. Guess what happens after 5 years of doing the same thing over and over?
It's a little stale.
It's stale. That's all they can do. Versus bringing in people who are working with 12 different types of clients in different industries and have a breadth of experience. And they go, oh yeah, I have a person for that. Hang on, I'll bring them in too. Okay, cool, we're good. And this is something that, again, if my mission is to help people learn how to build these and communicate these, because I'm telling you, the professional world is desperate for people to show up and do really great work, and to make sure that to give them an option so they don't have to work with these stale agencies that overcharge and underdeliver, which is a scourge at this point. So we need to learn how to band together, build these, and promote these, because there's so much opportunity and it's so lucrative that the concept of, well, you're still working and swinging the hammer. Well, it doesn't matter when you're making $400 an hour and pocketing 360 of that into some other, passive income stream or something. There's so many ways to do this.
Does the hub model work for other industries? I mean, you're kind of in the design industry. Is there any examples of people that you kind of help build this model, build this hub for different industries or niches?
Yeah, it works for any type of business model that doesn't need physical butts and physical seats. So this is another thing that we've kind of been able to leverage the technology with, is just like with you guys. If we were sitting down right now having a conversation about our next project that we're working together on, we have every tool imaginable to walk through concept storyboards, hey, what's the goals? How are we going to do this? I mean, everything is as if we were right in person. That's only going to become more ubiquitous. And for the record, I still meet in person all the time with my teams. I travel a lot. They come into town, they're in town. And so it's not that different, especially when you see these people who haven't walked into their Google office in 2.5 years and they're mad that they have to now, a lot of people have worked this way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's brutal seeing all these people get dragged back in. And after they've seen the other side, it's going to be Going to be an interesting next little transition. I was wondering, one of the questions that we like to ask all of our guests that come on is, how would you personally define entrepreneurship?
I'm glad that I didn't take a ton of time to think about this, because I would have gotten into a tangled web. I think there are two ways to look at this. I have actually really struggled with the term entrepreneur as this heroic sort of idyllic, again, being on the cover of, Inc. magazine or something ideal. If I were really being, grammar king, stickler, I would say an entrepreneur is somebody who builds businesses with the sole intent to sell them. And that is their craft. An entrepreneur is somebody who literally that's their entire job, is they build businesses and sell them. That's a true by the book definition of an entrepreneur. If I was being really stickler about it, and I have
kind
some
of black
reasons
and white.
why.
Yeah.
I would, yeah. Now, I don't think that I would commit to that, because I still love the idea that an entrepreneur, I think fundamentally, is somebody who is willing to take on the risk themselves. I think that really is the kind of linchpin for me, is they're willing to be the ones who say, okay, if this ship goes down, it's me, it's my fault, it's my thing. And they're the ones willing to take that responsibility and put it on their shoulders and ride with that. And I think that's probably, off the top of my head, the thing that stands out to me the most is somebody who would just be willing to take on that risk. And I know that's kind of back to the root word of what it really is. So I suppose that's fitting, but yeah.
Yeah, that works out great. It sounds like you've had a lot of really impactful mentors in your life. Is there any piece of advice that they've shared with you that you think, wow, this is going to stay with me forever, or this is something that I go back to a lot, that you think has really changed your trajectory?
There's so many. I've had so many wonderful mentors. I mean, I what stands out to me right now, because I was talking about sort of the rock bottom that I had.
Mm-hmm.
I have a very good relationship with my father, who's still around, luckily. And I did a very, very good job back then of hiding a lot of my suffering in life. In fact, all of it. From the outside, I don't think anybody would have told how rough things were. Down to my own dad, who I'm very close with and have been. And when I finally did start to tell him about the challenges and the problems that I was facing, I remember very distinctly him telling me, hey, when things start to get confusing and muddy and you're starting to lose your way, turn around and go back to what worked last and pick up from there. And that has always stuck with me, because it's so simple. And yet we're often very driven people. We're hardworking people with a lot of work ethic, and we want to believe we can grind through things, and that works for us a lot, but sometimes it doesn't. And it's really important that we remember sometimes, leave those breadcrumbs and turn around and go back to what worked last if we start to get lost.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I that really resonates with me, I think, because sometimes we're like chasing the next thing, and you kind of get caught up in this new routine and you start feeling kind of lost. And it's like, wait a minute, when did I last feel like I really had it all together and I felt like, things were working the way they should be? So leaving those breadcrumbs so you can go back to it. That's beautiful, beautiful recommendation and advice from your dad. I love that a lot. One more thing that I think is really interesting as we stay kind of on those mentors situations. You've talked a lot about how you've built out your network and how you have these people that you've relied on over the years. Can you give any advice to our aspiring entrepreneurs on how you felt it's worked best for you to build this team and how those relationships have been able to last through all the years?
Yeah, I think, for me, everything comes back to people. I'm obsessed with just trying to help other people. Like I take that attitude towards everything that I do. And I don't think that I'm not serving other people very well if I'm, doing my job halfway or cutting corners or becoming self-centered. And, for me, it was always about, hey, if I meet somebody new, what can I do for them? How can I help them? What about them is interesting? Listen to them, let them talk to you. And I guess I've always maybe I've been a little bit of like a golden retriever that way, that I'm just, I love people and I want to meet people. And I don't know. It's like bland food or something to live another way. Like, why would I just want to eat like, I don't know, ground chicken, with no spice, like spice that thing up. Let's get interesting. And I just have always found that life is way better when I knew a lot more people and talked to them and learned from them. And that's been the thing with social media for me, from going from literally like no followers at all a year ago to meeting thousands and thousands of people and interacting with hundreds of them all the time. It's awesome. Like, it's so incredible for me to be able to reach out and talk to these people and learn from them. And it makes me think a little bit about that trend of folks who are just very clearly out to just sort of see what they can get from you, that they just want to mine from other people. And that's so common. And honestly, I have a little sympathy for them because I can tell they're hurting. They're desperate for opportunity or money or whatever it is. And they just haven't learned the skill of
service,
patience around. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep. Having that service and the patience to just sort of let that manifest and happen, and that not everybody is a piece of meat. That's not how, like, transactional relationships to me are just really, I don't know, I guess the word is gross, right? I just am not, it doesn't appeal to me at all. So, I've always looked at other people as an opportunity to form good relationships and get into what they're into and see what they're all about and learn from them. And, so maybe fundamentally that's something that has driven my desire to want to learn how to network. And, people are so silly about that word.
Yes.
I don't know. I just learned this recently. I didn't know this, that there's a contingency of people who think it's just about collecting business cards or something. And I don't know. I guess maybe that's a thing. But for me,
everything is so nuanced. Yeah.
It's like, it's relationships. That's all. I'm just meeting other people so I can literally form relationships. And again, for me with the hub model, it was really important because, like, on one hand, clients are and opportunities for clients are really important. But again, I didn't want more clients. Guys, I have turned down millions in work, literally, straight up, because I don't want to either work with them. I don't have time to work with them. I'm just not interested in it. And the other side of my networking is to find people for my teams, so I need these other, like, I'm going to be paying them money, but I need their quality.
Yeah. Yeah. You're looking for spokes that you can rely on.
Yeah. Yeah. And so for me, it was just like, okay, well, I'll got to get out there and do it and go for it. And I don't know, for me, that's really fun. And I've helped a lot of introverts with that. There's people who are kind of naturally introverted, and I've helped them kind of realize that, hey, you don't have to be, I'm actually remarkably introverted in a lot of ways. So, I help them overcome that too, that you don't have to, it's not a dog and pony cheerleader show. There's ways to network and learn who each other are. And social media has made that a lot easier because you're not, directly in front of people so often.
Right.
But yeah, people are the most important thing to me. So it's easy.
I like getting that message out there that you said about, you can be an introvert and still make these connections, still build these relationships. I think there's a misconception that you have to be this extroverted person in order to be successful in business. And, we've had several entrepreneurs on that have said, I'm an introvert, but this is how I go about it. This is how I build these relationships. It's still doable. You can try all these other ways to go about it, meeting people and building your network. The other thing that I kind of liked that you were touching on there was, I think there's an idea that the solopreneur lives a kind of lonely life. He's just that he or she out there by himself in the world trying to create this business all on his own. But with your model, it just means that they're not W-2 employees. They're still working with a lot of different people and engaging, interfacing with a lot of talented people. And you just get to be more selective and choosy, I guess, when you do it the way that you do it. And yeah, I love that. So there are a lot of people in our audience who are just not happy. They're unfulfilled, unsatisfied with their careers, and think, man, if I could just go out there and kick some ass like Torrey, that would be a dream come true. So what parting advice do you have for those folks listening who are sitting in the cubicle? They want to get out. They want to break off the shackles.
I mean, again, it depends a little bit where they are, but if they're starting from scratch, I just recommend to people, just start talking about what's important to you. The social media thing, just get on there, start talking to other people, like get involved with other folks and have conversations, start talking about the things that matter to you, start talking about the important things in your industry. And I hope to God that they're in an industry they actually want to be in. That's a really big deal to me. Don't settle, don't go into there's only money in this thing, so I have to do it. That's just a soul sucking thing. There's arguments for it, perhaps, if you understand that that's something that's a short-term thing. But for the most part, I would really rather that people learn that there's money to be made in just about everything. I'm sure you guys have talked to people who have some very idiosyncratic ways of making money. And I'm like, listen, there's always a top 5 percentile and you can join it and make good money there. So I have a whole thing about, like, excitement is critical. I think that most people suffer from lack of excitement. I think that's actually what causes them to procrastinate. I think that's what causes them to lose track of their journey and their dreams and to settle, is that they lack excitement and they forget what that feels like. So I want them to choose things that excite them, which means they ought to want to talk about that and get out on social media and start doing that. The tactical thing on the business side, start freelancing. If you're on the service side, start freelancing right now. You can find opportunities to do that. If you're in a situation where you can't freelance, or maybe you have an arrangement with your employer or whatever, find a different employer or start doing practice case studies or something. I don't know what else to tell you, but don't allow yourself to be a slave to that. Like, you have to figure out a way to start getting your skill set and your work out there. And that's like training wheels for business. You start to learn that. So I think right off the top of my head, those are sort of the two things that I think people should start doing, is just start showing that your passion and obsession with something is real by talking about it and connecting with other people who care too, and start practicing your craft on your own terms with freelancing.
Yeah, Torrey, that excitement aspect that you just said, I think it's just like so powerful, because it's so true that when you're doing something that you passionately enjoy and that you're excited about, you're going to want to do it and you're going to take it on. Whereas it's so easy, and I notice it, just looking at my to-do list every day, it's like, man, I will find so many things to go do, walk in my backyard, feed my turtles, go help my wife with the and not do the things that I'm not excited about. So that simple term of do things that you're excited about, because it will help make your job more enjoyable and it'll be easier for you. I think it's such a simple thing to say, but man, that is so powerful to have things that you're excited about doing as your job. So I think that's really simple, but such powerful advice. I appreciate that.
You bet, man. I dig it.
We all have such different paths that lead us to where we are. But I want to just say, Torrey, I super appreciate you sharing yours path to finding your own freedom. I know a lot of people are going to want to reach out to you. Where should we send them?
Well, I guess social media at Torrey Dawley. TorreyDawley.com is my personal website, so that works too. But yeah, either way.
I love that. Thank you so much. There's so many good nuggets in this one. I'm looking forward to going back through and pulling out all the highlights, because I think there's just some really powerful things for our audience in there.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate it. This was awesome. This was such a fun chat.
You did great, Torrey. Thanks a lot, man. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Doug. Thanks, Jonathan.
Being an entrepreneur is hard. That's why we created findyourfreedompod.com to compile all the resources you need to find your own freedom.